Okay, it's time to talk about that line, and it's time to talk about N'Zoth. Now, whenever he said that, we just kind of all thought it was more bravado. But here's the deal, it wasn't a bluff. He was telling the truth. I think he knew the Void Lords were coming, and he knew that they would destroy him too. And that's because by the time he said that, the old gods had already long betrayed the Void Lords. Now here's what we thought we knew. Reading Chronicle, we learned that the Void Lords wanted to consume all of reality, but they couldn't manifest in it. They kind of existed outside reality, some H.P. Lovecraft stuff. So what they did is they made the old gods, and they spat them into the Great Dark. And from there, these old gods would consume worlds, and ideally, using that energy, they would then summon in their Void Lord Masters, which does seem like a simple enough story. But something changed, and that something is the old gods, and we even know why. So today what I'm going to do is explain how they built this lie over 2 decades. So if recent times have left you feeling not up to date with the lore or just confused about how, say, N'Zoth and patch 8.3 even ties into the stuff that's going on today, well, the good news is we made this video for you. Here's something neat and mildly disturbing. Chances are if you Google your name, it'll actually appear. People's search sites literally sell your addresses and phone numbers for money, and that's where today's sponsor, Incogni, just got even more powerful. That's because their service already pulls your data off more than 250 data broker sites and keeps it down with continuous rescans. But the new unlimited plan adds a feature called custom removals. Here's how it works. If you spot your info, say some sketchy directory or a business lookup site, you just paste that link into your dashboard, and Incogni's privacy team will file the takedown for you, and within about 45 days, it'll be gone. And there's no limit on how many links you can submit. You can just keep firing them in there until your search results are clean. Now, of course, Incogni can't, go to the government and delete you from them, but aside from the likes of that, they let you maximize your legal right to have your data taken down. As an example, whenever I go to my Incogni dashboard, I see that they took me down from People Data Labs. I don't want to have my data on People Data Labs because that sounds sketchy as hell. So, if you want the same peace of mind, head to incogni.com/Bellular Warcraft. You'll get 60% off the annual unlimited plan and get yourself a clean slate online. The best place to start today's story is actually the story that you can play, and it's in the new lore walking feature. So we sit down with Cho, and we're brought back to some of our first interactions with Xal'atath. We see ourselves traveling the world, gathering power, gathering artifacts. Then, quite a bit later, in Battle for Azeroth, we've got to get her a new body. We successfully do that. And then comes the Crucible of Storms. Now that's where Xal'atath demands that N'Zoth honors the bargain that the two of them made. Which in a way is a little bit strange. I mean, why is some strange lady who used to be stuck in a dagger, who is now walking around in someone else's corpse, suddenly able to demand things from an old god that was, built up over years and years to be a massive looming threat? Even back then, we knew that there must have been some deal in the past. What's cool is that today, we can actually play through that deal. We can see it happen. We're then transported to a view far back in time to the days of the Black Empire, which is when the old gods ruled the entire planet. And what we see there does change everything. Now, if you just skipped through the quest and you weren't reading the text, you would see the basics. Xal'atath, a powerful void entity, has launched an attack. You might know exactly why, but she has been called the Harbinger a whole bunch of the time, so you just assume, as Harbinger of Demencius. Let's just work with that understanding for now. Obviously, though, she loses. The old gods defeat her, and she gets trapped in the Blade. So there you go. Neat story. That's how Xal'atath got in the Blade. But it's actually the details of that story that really matter here. They have huge implications, so let me break it all down for you. Okay, the Black Empire exists. The 4 old gods essentially cover the entire surface of Azeroth. They haven't corrupted the world soul yet. Then Xal'atath arrives, of course on the surface as Harbinger of the Void. Her mission, we assume, is to watch these old gods to ensure that, I suppose, they are doing whatever it is that they're meant to be doing. And at first glance, all looks well, but soon, Xal'atath makes a discovery. She discovers that N'Zoth, one of the old gods, has been building something below Ny'alotha, Ny'alotha essentially being his main base of power. And whatever this thing is, it seemingly leaves Xal'atath with no choice other than to attack them. And unfortunately for her, she loses. And as punishment, she is bound within the Black Blade. Just before her fate is sealed, she plays a final card. Yeshiraj, one of the old gods, passes judgment on her. He tells Xal'atath that she will be eternally sealed, that she will watch the world gain untold power without her. And there's actually a clue in that. Yeshiraj wants the world, Azeroth, to gain untold power, not the Void Lords who we would have assumed Xal'atath was serving. And we can infer why, that he is basically taunting her, saying, hey, you will never claim this, or hey, your boss will never claim this. That's when Zal bites back. She calls them pestilence parading as lords, essentially saying that they were mold sent by the Void Lords to weaken Azeroth, but that now they've moved beyond their function. Now, in a way, that's a sick burn, but ultimately, they had way more power than she did, so that's why she ended up in this mess. But she isn't any old void creature, she's Xal'atath, and from this she will find her way out. So here's how the logic goes. If each old god can have a goal of its own, then she can just play them against each other. And that is when Xal'atath makes her bargain with N'Zoth. You see, the truth of today's video is that Xal'atath is actually not the main character of the video. N'Zoth is the main character of the video, because in making that deal with Xal'atath, he changed everything. I alone can save you from what is to come. Those words came from N'Zoth, and they were not a lie. They were in fact a warning because N'Zoth knew what was coming. You know, he kind of knew Xal'atath's plans. He had at least made some plans with her, and he likely believed that through her, the Void Lords would make their attempt to basically win, which would be bad for him. He also believed that he was the only one who could save us. Okay, now here, I'm going to bring in two old god whispers. One of them is from Il'gynoth. It goes way back. Here's the whisper. He draws strength from the earth, our strength. That's one line. Much later after we heard that line, in the Dragonflight expansion, we returned to the Black Empire. Basically, some time bollocks happened. We ended up back there, and when we were there, we heard another line that shares its pattern. Here's the line. Her dreams sing beneath the surface. Our dreams, our song. Now, when they say our, I believe they mean them, the old gods, not Team Void, not Team Dimensius. I think that's especially obvious in light of Xal'atath's initial defeat on Azeroth. We literally see her get defeated and stuffed into a dagger. What these lines are saying, then, is that Azeroth's earth is theirs, and that they draw strength from it. That as she dreams, she sings their words. It's essentially them saying, hey, we're in deeper than you could have possibly known. Now, with that in mind, let's return to the Crucible of Storms. This is in the Battle for Azeroth expansion, and it's really where the N'Zoth stuff kicks into high gear. It's also when Xal'atath returns to the story. So, as we know, Xal'atath offers us to N'Zoth. She calls us the opener, the bringer of truths, the torch that lights the way. And she clearly knows that N'Zoth wants us for some reason, so she basically uses us, along with some other things, as a bargaining chip for her freedom. And that leads to an obvious question. Why did N'Zoth want us? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at where N'Zoth then sent us, to the raid version of the Crucible of Storms. But before we went to the raid, he gave us the gift of N'Zoth in return for bringing him those various artifacts that we collected along with Xal'atath. And this gift was a visual effect present in player characters, and it marks us as his champion. So, now marked as his champion, we then challenge the Crucible. And first, we fight the Restless Cabal. We're told they're N'Zoth servants who failed to bring him those various artifacts. We of course succeeded where they failed, and in this, we can see that his own servants weren't powerful enough for his plan. He evidently needed someone real powerful, like us. And if we die, we are called unworthy for the Master, which is rather telling. The final challenge of that raid, though, is Unat. And it's big, because he tells us that we will serve or we will die. And as it turns out, he is the one who dies. We are the ones who live. And remember, he said we will serve or we will die. So because we lived, guess what? We're serving. And the way to understand this is simple. Unat's final act, basically, is telling N'Zoth that we are worthy, that we have passed the test. Which then makes you think, worthy for what? Thinking back to the scene with Xal'atath and N'Zoth, she didn't just hand us over, she also gave N'Zoth the dagger. Now, the Horde adventurer then hands it to Sylvanas, who then cuts a deal with Queen Ashara, and that deal would go like this. The dagger would go to Nathanos. Nathanos would then lure the Alliance fleet over Nazjatar. Ashara would then drain the seas, destroying their fleet. That would be a great victory for the Horde, and in return, Nathanos would give Ashara the blade. So you might wonder then, why does Ashara want the blade? Quite simple, she wants the blade to kill N'Zoth. But hang on a second, if N'Zoth is so smart, so gigabrain, then why did he give the Horde the dagger that would just end up in Ashara's hands when it's a dagger that could kill him? That really seems counter to his goals. As it turns out, very much not the case. That's because Ashara's goal, Xal'atath's goal, and N'Zoth's goal are kind of all the same. They want personal freedom. Now here's the next bit. Ashara's palace is built atop his prison. He wanted out, Ashara wanted to kill him. And it's, special Titan prison, you can't just waltz in there. But remember, N'Zoth sent us through the Crucible of Storms for a reason, to test us. And this is where we come into the picture. We're obviously quite pissed off with Ashara, so both the Alliance and the Horde, with of course the Horde not being fully aware of the things that Sylvanas is up to, we both decide to attack her palace. Which of course is what Ashara was actually counting on. You see, we clear our way through the raid, we then get to her, and she begins the ritual to free N'Zoth from prison. But she does it using the Heart of Azeroth's energy, the thing that we had been fueling up, so she kind of plays us there. But what happens next is essential, but it does trip up loads of people. Because look, it's BFA lore, it was all a bit convoluted. So we defeated Ashara, but we were too late. The ritual had already completed. N'Zoth was free, just as he had expected. You see, when Unat said that we were worthy, what it basically meant is, hey, these guys have defeated me. They have passed the test. They will be able to defeat Ashara. So N'Zoth only continued the whole plan with that knowledge in mind, because after we defeat Unat, the Horde player then gets the quest that passes the dagger along to Sylvanas. It then, of course, gets to Queen Ashara. Like, seriously, he was counting the fact that she would try to betray him. Here's why, right? She would only attempt to kill him if she thought she had a really high chance of winning. She wouldn't break the seal and then try to toss a few fireballs at him. So no, she needed to believe she would win. And of course, having the dagger, a dagger capable of housing a super powerful void entity, obviously she thought she would be able to win. And you know what? If we weren't there, she probably would have won. But that's the thing, we were there, we were too strong. By the time the ritual completes, she's basically going unconscious because we've absolutely clobbered her. And because she's unconscious, she cannot use the blade. Meaning that N'Zoth is now free, and the blade that would be able to kill him or imprison him is on Queen Ashara, who is currently lying down on the floor. Of course, N'Zoth then slurps her into a portal. So basically, what we see here in N'Zoth's actions is calculated risk-taking. He estimated that if we could defeat Unat, we'd be able to take on Ashara, and he's right, we're able to beat her. So, let's again think about that line, I alone can save you from what is to come. What was he talking about? And how would that play into his next plan? Because here is where all of that was going. So to understand things, we only need to watch what he would go and do next, and that was to try to summon Ny'alotha into our reality. Now, Ny'alotha was his power base within the Azeroth-spanning Black Empire way back in the day. Though what we did not know is what we just learned in lore walking, that he was also building something underneath Ny'alotha. And remember, whatever that something was, it was enough to make Xal'atath immediately try to attack all the old gods and take him out. Obviously, she fails, but when N'Zoth says, I alone can save you from what is to come, I think this is what he was talking about, to bring Ny'alotha back, to bring the Black Empire back. And if that we would all only just join him, everything would be great, and we wouldn't go to the Shadowlands. Because yeah, at the time, we thought the what is to come was the whole jailer thing with the Shadowlands. But then something weird happened. We defeated the jailer. What did he do? He also said we could not survive what was to come. And funnily enough, that then sparked my memory back in the day. I thought, hang on a second, I've heard that before. From Morozond in the Cataclysm expansion. So what's really going on here? Are all of these characters talking about the same thing? The same what is to come? I'd actually say, yeah, it's pretty damn likely. Just that whenever Morozond said that, we thought the old gods served the Void Lords, but we just now know they served themselves. And if you think about all of those instances, 2 of them are directly connected to N'Zoth. And if this seems insane to you, that's completely fine. It actually should. And that's because, unfortunately, I hate to break it to you, you're a human, as am I, and we don't experience time and causality like an old god does. Old gods can see all timelines, all futures. They have a little bit of a problem. They can peer into all these future timelines, but they can't really tell which one is actually going to pass. But luckily for N'Zoth, we actually later gave him the evidence that he would need. Much later on in the Dragonflight expansion, we had to rescue Chromie from the past. Now this took us all the way back to the Black Empire, before the Titans had arrived in Azeroth, so way, way, way back in the day. And when we go there, who do we meet? We meet this, a knowing presence. This is a presence that, based on what it says, I would say is almost certainly N'Zoth. I mean, just think about the name, knowing presence. Then remember how old gods experience time and experience causality. N'Zoth could see all these potential timelines, including ones where we defeat him, defeat the jailer, then end up in Thaldraszus, and then go back in time to see him in the Black Empire. Now, from his perspective, up until this point, he could have seen all these different timelines, but by us actually popping up, we confirm for him what direction the true timeline would go in. Now, there's a whole thing in the canon about what the true timeline is and the Titans, but I'm just going to set that aside for now. It doesn't really matter for today's video. What basically matters is us showing up confirmed to N'Zoth the timeline that would come to pass. And by confirming that, it also confirmed a whole bunch of other things. It means he probably knows about the Primal Incarnates, about Iridikron, Midnight, the Last Titan. His challenge is simple then. It's to outplay everyone, and to do that by just doing what he always did, which is snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. And we actually get some texture in this from none other than Xal'atath herself. Way back, pretty much when we first met her in Legion, she said this: "But as was so often the case, even defeat ultimately worked in N'Zoth's favor." Now, there are many ways he could still be in play. As an example, do you know where the Black Blade is? Like, seriously, the Black Blade. When's the last time you saw it? I know it was it being stuck into the carapace of N'Zoth, but where did it go after that? Which is a little bit curious, because it's a dagger that can contain an absurdly powerful void entity. It fits Xal'atath, why couldn't it fit an old god? Why couldn't N'Zoth hang out and hide out in there until the time is right? But however that does or does not go, there's something hanging over all of this. It may seem like a plot hole, right? Something I'm sure a few of you have picked up. Why would the Void Lords do the old god thing? I mean, seriously, are the Void Lords so stupid that they would send absurdly powerful beings with free will and a lust for power after the ultimate source of power, fully expecting them to just hand it over? No, that's really stupid. Do you know what the real answer is? The real why? It's actually Azeroth. Yeah, if you've been out of the loop, today's video really is the brain expansion meme, but this is the last bit. Trust me, it's been worth it, it's going to be good. So, the War Within's Earthen storyline essentially existed to show us how Azeroth is capable of changing the essential nature of a being. That might sound all, wordy, but here's the most obvious version of it. The Thragar. They're the Earthen who turned to Diamond and then rebelled against the other Titanforged, who are building something called the World Core around Azeroth. Basically, right? Azeroth got into their heads, gave them sort of free will, they sided with her, became more powerful, and did a little rebellion trying to bust her out of jail. They obviously failed. But here's the thing. We only find out about that via a log left over by one of the Titan Keepers, Arcadus. And in the log, he openly acknowledges that he's not supposed to be saying the things that he's saying, but that yet he feels compelled to say them. So he knows whatever he's saying is basically against protocol. So the question is why? I mean, especially if he is this big Titan-forged thing that exists to serve a very specific purpose from the Titans, beings of order, order. You don't go against them. And that's where it all ties together. The answer is Azeroth. Much like how she was able to change the Earthen into the Thragar and give them free will, guess what? She was able to change a little bit of something in Arcadus, such that he would leave this log, perhaps so that one day eventually someone sympathetic to her cause would find it. And to be clear, these two examples are not the only ones that exist in the War Within expansion. Basically what we see, though, is the changing of thoughtless beings of order to beings that have got free will. So if that can be done to beings of order, why not to beings of void? Why not to the old gods? That would make perfect sense of all of this. The idea that the pestilence sent to conquer Azeroth in the Void Lord's name was harnessed against its master. Because if it had its own free will, it would not have served the Void Lord's purpose, right? So that just doesn't make sense. No, they had to have gained free will on Azeroth. How could that happen? Pretty simply, with Azeroth, which is something we have seen now multiple times in this expansion. And by granting these beings free will, what else happens? Well, ego, personal desire, right? Such a being wouldn't want to complete its mission if that just meant that it would be consumed and destroyed. That would be discarded. And we also know that of all the old gods, N'Zoth was the smartest one. Now, it may seem a little bit weird that Azeroth would do this, but I want you to think about it from her point of view. Azeroth is trapped in a dream state, right? Just stuck in there. A mind with incomparably vast power, but one that, to use a simple analogy, is still in an egg. Now, if you're a fan of the Dune books, think about Alia Atreides being able to influence those around her from within the womb, what in that canon is called a preborn. At least for the purposes of this story, Azeroth seems rather similar. She's stuck in there. She can't do anything physical, but what she can do is free their minds so that they can then pursue their own goals. And in doing that, she gained what she needed, which simply is time. Time until somehow, eventually, something, one of her children perhaps, is able to rescue her from this horrible waking nightmare lucid dream, her dream, our song, etc., that she has basically been stuck in for a countless amount of time. So, do you think N'Zoth is still in the Dagger, or do you think he's dead and gone and we'll never see him? Either way, I hope this video has essentially been able to explain and to lay out all of the weird intersection of the old god lore and the void lore so that it actually makes sense. The context, Xal'atath, the War Within, Midnight, and the Last Titan. I'll say this much, I long for the day where we no longer have got to untangle and fix all of this lore from, Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, because look, what Blizzard are actually doing now is incorporating that in a way where it actually works for the current story that they want to tell, and that kind of sidesteps the real shitty things of those two expansions. Definitely a constraint, one that I think they're approaching creatively, which I'm enjoying, but man, I really can't wait until finally I can stop thinking about the jailer. So, on that bombshell, thanks for watching, and if you want to actually learn about what's going on in the next expansion and how the lore has shifted and changed, watch this video next.